I remembered the exact moment it happened. I bought a jacket, not a crazy one, not a luxury brand, just a really nice jacket. The kind that makes you stand a little straighter when you put it on. And that's when the problem started. Because suddenly, my old shoes looked wrong. My backpack felt cheap. My phone case felt embarrassing. Nothing else had changed. Same job, same paycheck, same bank balance. But somehow everything around me felt not good enough. Have you ever noticed how one upgrade never stays just one? Why a single purchase quietly rewrites what normal looks like. Because that jacket didn't just cost me money, it changed the standard I was trying to live up to. My name is not important. I'm not a billionaire. I didn't retire at 32. I'm just someone who goes to work, pays bills, and tries to make decent decisions with money. And for a long time, I thought my financial stress came from big mistakes, bad investments, not earning enough, not budgeting hard enough. But what I slowly realized is that most of my money didn't disappear in dramatic moments. It leaked out quietly, through upgrades, through just one more thing, through decisions that felt reasonable in isolation, but devastating when stacked together. There's a name for this pattern. It's called the Diderot Effect. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The idea comes from a simple observation. When you add something new and better to your life, it can make everything else around it feel outdated, mismatched, or inadequate. Not because those things stopped working, but because your standards shifted. That jacket didn't break my budget by itself. What broke my budget was everything that followed it. And here's why this matters. This effect doesn't target reckless spenders. It targets normal people, responsible people, people who waited before upgrading. The system isn't designed to punish you for overspending, it's designed to reward you for continuing. One upgrade creates discomfort. Discomfort creates rationalization. Rationalization creates momentum. And suddenly your lifestyle costs more without ever feeling like a choice. In this video, I want to break this down slowly and honestly. We're going to talk about where this effect comes from, how it shows up in everyday life, and why it feels so hard to stop once it starts. Well, do the math most people never do. Well, look at how companies intentionally design products and ecosystems to take advantage of this exact behavior. And most importantly, we'll talk about how to escape it without guilt, without shame, and without pretending you need monk-like discipline to win. Because this isn't about being cheap, it's about understanding why better so often ends up costing us far more than we expected. The Diderot Effect is named after a man who never meant to teach anyone about money. Denis Diderot was an 18th century philosopher. He wasn't wealthy. He lived modestly. By most accounts, his life was simple, practical, and financially tight. Then one day, someone gave him a gift, a beautiful robe. Not just new, elegant, rich fabric, deep color, the kind of thing that feels out of place the moment you put it on. At first, Diderot loved it, but almost immediately something strange happened. When he sat down in his chair, the chair felt ugly. The desk looked old. The rug looked worn. The bookshelves looked cheap. Nothing had changed, except the standard. The robe didn't create happiness. It created contrast, and that contrast was unbearable. So Diderot did what any rational person would do. He upgraded the chair, then the desk, then the rug, then the art. Piece by piece, he replaced his old life to match the new version of himself that robe seemed to demand. By the end, he had transformed his surroundings completely, and he had spent far more than he could afford. Later, Diderot wrote about this experience with regret. He described how one object had quietly pulled him into a lifestyle he never planned to live and couldn't sustain. The most important part of the story isn't the spending, it's the feeling. The robe made his old life feel wrong. That's the core of the Diderot effect. It's not about wanting more, it's about wanting things to match. When one thing in your life improves, everything else is suddenly measured against it. And when things don't line up, your brain treats that mismatch like a problem that needs fixing. Not logically, emotionally. And once that process starts, it rarely feels optional. You're not chasing luxury, you're chasing consistency. That's why this effect is so dangerous. Because it doesn't feel like indulgence, it feels like restoration. This is the part where most people say, okay, sure, but I'm not buying antique robes, I'm just buying normal stuff. So let's talk about normal stuff. Let's say you buy a new laptop. Nothing outrageous, just something faster, cleaner, nicer than the old one. The laptop costs $1,500. That's the number you remember. But here's what actually happens. Your old desk suddenly feels cramped. So you buy a better desk, $400. Now the chair doesn't match. Your back starts hurting. You upgrade the chair, $600. The screen is great, but small. You add a monitor, $300. The built-in speakers are terrible. Headphones, $250. You start working more seriously now. You subscribe to software, $30 a month. That's 360 a year. You didn't go on a shopping spree. You didn't act irresponsibly. Each decision felt reasonable. But let's add it up. That 1,500 laptop quietly turned into 3,050 up front, and then another 360 every single year. Over 3 years, that small upgrade costs closer to 4,000. And that's just a laptop. The same thing happens with phones. A new phone leads to a new case, new charger, new earbuds, more storage, insurance. Cars are even worse. A better car doesn't just cost more to buy, it costs more to insure, more to fuel, more to maintain, more to park. And here's the dangerous part. None of this feels like lifestyle inflation. It feels like maintenance. You're not upgrading because you want more. You're upgrading because everything else feels like it's falling behind. Have you ever said this to yourself? Well, if I already spent this much, it doesn't make sense to cheap out now. That sentence alone has probably cost people millions of dollars collectively, because the Diderot effect doesn't hit your bank account all at once. It hits in fragments, small enough to justify, frequent enough to normalize, and by the time you realize your monthly expenses have permanently increased, the decision that caused it is already 3 upgrades behind you. Here's the part that most money advice gets wrong. This isn't about willpower. If it were, smarter people wouldn't fall into it. More disciplined people wouldn't fall into it. People who track every dollar wouldn't fall into it. But they do. Because what's driving this isn't logic, it's discomfort. When one part of your life upgrades, it creates a mismatch. And the human brain hates mismatch. We are wired to seek consistency, not just in our beliefs, but in our surroundings, our identity, and how we see ourselves fitting into the world. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. It's that low-level irritation you feel when things don't line up. When your jacket says one thing about you, but your shoes say another. When your job title changes, but your lifestyle doesn't catch up. When your income increases, but your environment still reflects your old self. Your brain doesn't interpret this as optional spending. It interprets it as a problem. And problems demand solutions. That's why upgrading feels urgent. That's why it feels justified. That's why it feels necessary. Then there's something even more powerful at play: identity signaling. We don't just buy things to use them, we buy things to confirm who we are to ourselves and to others. When you upgrade one item, you're not just buying an object, you're buying a version of yourself. And once you buy that version, everything else that contradicts it starts to feel like a lie. That's why a new phone makes an old case feel embarrassing. Why a promotion makes an old car feel inadequate. Why a nicer apartment makes cheap furniture feel temporary. You're not chasing happiness, you're chasing coherence. And once coherence becomes the goal, the spending doesn't stop when the problem is solved, because the solution keeps moving. This is where the hedonic treadmill comes in. You adapt fast. What once felt like an upgrade quickly becomes normal. And once it's normal, it stops delivering satisfaction, but it still sets the standard. So now anything below that standard feels like a loss. And humans are deeply loss averse. We feel losses more strongly than gains. So giving something up, even something we never needed, feels worse than never having it at all. That's why cutting back feels harder than upgrading. It's not because you're weak, it's because your brain is protecting a version of yourself it thinks you've already become. And once that happens, spending stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like self-preservation. At this point, it's tempting to think this is just an unfortunate human flaw, but that would be letting the system off too easily. Because once you understand the Diderot effect, you start to notice something uncomfortable modern products are designed to trigger it. Most companies aren't selling single items anymore. They're selling ecosystems. You don't buy a phone. You buy a phone that works best with specific earbuds, a specific charger, a specific watch, a specific cloud service, and a specific set of accessories. Each piece makes the others feel incomplete without it. This isn't accidental. It's called lock-in. Once you've upgraded one part of the system, switching back feels painful. Switching brands feels expensive, and staying put means continuing to upgrade just to maintain compatibility. The same thing happens with cars, furniture, fitness, fashion, even hobbies. You don't buy running shoes. You buy running shoes that suggest better clothes, a fitness watch, a gym membership, supplements, and an identity that says, I'm a runner now. Marketing rarely says, buy this product. It says, become this person. That's why ads don't show objects, they show lifestyles. Clean desks, calm apartments, confident bodies, happy families. People who look like they've figured things out. The message isn't subtle. If your life doesn't look like this, something is missing. And once you take the first step toward that image, every gap becomes visible. Companies understand something most of us don't articulate. People don't want more stuff, they want fewer contradictions. So products are designed to create just enough contrast to make the next purchase feel reasonable. Not extravagant, not reckless, responsible. That's also why prices are often broken into smaller pieces. Monthly payments, add-ons, subscriptions, upgrades. When the cost is fragmented, the lifestyle feels affordable even when the total is not. And here's the part that matters most. This system doesn't require you to be impulsive. It doesn't require you to be bad with money. It only requires you to care about doing things properly. Once properly becomes the goal, spending becomes a moral act. Cutting back starts to feel like failure, and stopping entirely feels like giving up on the person you were trying to become. That's how a psychological quirk turns into a revenue model. So how do you escape this without turning into someone who never buys anything nice? Because that's the fear, right? That if you stop upgrading, you'll fall behind. That if you don't keep up, you're choosing a smaller life. The goal here isn't to reject quality or ambition. It's to break the automatic chain reaction. The first tool is something I call the orphan rule. Before buying anything, ask yourself one question. Can this item exist on its own? An orphan item is something that doesn't demand companions. It doesn't make the rest of your life feel inadequate. It doesn't create pressure to upgrade anything else just to feel complete. A good example? A high-quality winter coat that replaces 3 cheap ones. A bad example? A new phone that immediately makes your charger, earbuds, watch, and data plan feel obsolete. If an item requires a supporting cast to feel right, it's not one purchase. It's a subscription to future spending. The second tool is role-based buying. Instead of asking, is this good, ask, what job am I hiring this to do? Not the identity job, the functional job. A desk's job is to hold a computer comfortably. A car's job is to get you where you need to go safely. A phone's job is communication. The moment a purchase starts doing identity work, signaling success, maturity, or belonging, the Diderot Effect wakes up. That doesn't mean identity purchases are forbidden. It means they should be intentional, not automatic. The third tool is time separation. Most upgrade chains rely on speed. You buy something, you feel the mismatch, you fix it immediately. So add friction. Commit to a waiting period, not because you might change your mind, but because the discomfort fades. When the emotional pressure disappears, you can see whether the upgrade was actually necessary or just soothing. Often, the urge doesn't survive a week. The fourth tool is identity anchoring. This is the most important one. If your sense of worth is anchored to consumption, every upgrade feels urgent. If it's anchored to time, relationships, or autonomy, upgrades lose their power. Ask yourself regularly, if no one ever saw this, would I still want it? That question exposes whether you're buying utility or reassurance. And finally, there's the quiet math most people never run. Every upgrade has an opportunity cost, not just money flexibility. Higher fixed expenses reduce your ability to take a lower stress job. Weather emergencies. Say no when you want to buy time back later in life. When you stop automatic upgrading, you don't just save money. You buy room to breathe, room to choose, room to live slightly below the standard you could afford, and far above the stress you don't need. That's not deprivation, that's leverage. Most people don't get into financial trouble because they're reckless. They get there quietly, one upgrade at a time, one this makes sense purchase after another, one attempt to feel like their life finally matches who they think they should be. The Diderot Effect works because it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like progress. But progress that requires constant spending is fragile, and a lifestyle that needs continuous upgrades is expensive to maintain emotionally and financially. The truth is, you don't need to keep upgrading to move forward. You don't need everything in your life to match perfectly, and you don't need your surroundings to prove your worth. Some of the most powerful financial decisions you'll ever make won't show up on Instagram. They'll look like keeping the old phone, sitting in the same chair, driving the same car a little longer. Not because you can't afford better, but because you've decided what better actually means. If this video helped you see your own spending patterns more clearly, consider sharing it with someone who might need it too. And if you want more conversations like this about money, time, and the systems that quietly shape our choices, you can subscribe here. Because at the end of the day, I don't want you to be wealthy just on paper. I want you to be wealthy in life.